Welcome to Future Conversations, the podcast that explores research through the lens of tomorrow by Monash University, Malaysia.
Welcome to Future Conversations. I am Mira Sivisodi, Professor of Practice, Digital Media and Communication at Monash University, Malaysia. Today we are asking, has academia lost its way? Are we trading genuine problem solving for a numbers game of publications and funding? Joining us, Professor Matthias from the Center for Reproducible Science and Research Synthesis and Department of Infectious Diseases at the University of Zurich in Switzerland. Also Professor of Population Health Sciences at the University of Bristol, United Kingdom. Welcome to the show, Professor Matthias.
Thank you very much for having me.
You're most welcome. This is a very interesting topic, and I know all the academics are going to be listening to this because it affects them very much. The current system, Professor, strongly incentivizes academics to generate long CVs with hundreds of articles. How has this pressure to publish, driven by institutional KPIs and promotional criteria, how has that shifted academia from a problem-solving pursuit to what some of us might call a publishing game?
Yeah, I think it is a real issue in the sense that it has taken out creativity out of the, being an academic. It has taken out fun because you're sort of in a treadmill and you have to produce as many papers as possible. And I don't think it has been good for the quality of science, because science is all about discovering, freely thinking, and not being in that treadmill of producing the next paper.
Yeah. Is it true that we come up with about 5 million articles published annually? Is that about the right number?
Yes, and that has been increasing massively in recent years. Also, which is not a bad thing, due to digitalization. So the open access publications have gained much more prominence, and it's of course easier, quicker to produce articles in this new way. You basically just have to produce a PDF file, and then you put that into the system. So it has become much easier to publish more articles for the publishers.
What do you think has brought us to this?
What has brought us to this situation?
Yes, exactly.
I think it is a tendency that you want to be very accountable. You want to be able to really measure everything objectively. But on the other hand, when it comes to what is good research and what is a good researcher who should be promoted, this is not really a measurement problem, but it's a problem of judgment. And perhaps the willingness to really think and engage with that person's contributions to science has diminished, and the wish to have a simple system with numbers has taken over, and we need to step back from that.
Yeah, and I listened to your lecture earlier today, and that is what you spoke about. It's about a case of judgment versus outputs. Do you want to just tell us more about that? What do you actually mean?
I mean, we want to stop counting beans and, having journal-based metrics where someone has published without actually looking at the content of the publication. We want to understand what has this person contributed to science, what were the major contributions, and that could be one or two publications rather than 50, which were really impactful. We should publish less and publish for the right reasons, because we've got something to communicate. We are not writing this paper just to write the paper. We're actually writing this because we've got important findings to share. So this is what we should promote in academia, that we sort of go back from numbers to content and from the package of the journal to what's inside.
So we go back to promotional criteria, but you have highlighted the use and misuse of impact factors. There's a lot of reliance on impact factors, and citation counts sort of distort scientific priorities. What is a more holistic system you think that we should go
Yeah,
towards?
I mean, the problem with the impact factor is that it is a journal-based metric, and it's heavily influenced by a few very highly cited papers, which sort of pull that average up to where the impact factor is lying. And actually many articles that are published in that journal receive much fewer citations. So the citations, I think, do tell you something about the work, about an article, but it should be really about this article. But of course, citations are not everything. Some papers get cited because they're very controversial and they sort of are provocative, which is not a bad thing, but it's not necessarily a reflection of the quality of that paper. It's a reflection of the provocative nature of the message of the paper. So you also, within citations, you need to understand why a paper was cited. But if someone has many papers that are really highly cited in that field, it means this person has impact, academic impact. It doesn't necessarily mean the person has impact on society or makes a huge contribution to improving people's lives. So these are different things and different dimensions, and we should be able to not only measure, the academic input, but also the societal input.
Why is it
or impact?
Why is it we have not measured impact for research in a social and economic sense, as well as how we contribute to larger conversations? Why is that only coming up now?
Because it's much more difficult.
Much more difficult to measure?
Yeah, it's much more difficult because it really is much more judgment. Of course, you can measure the number of patents someone has. That is, that possibly might lead to economic impact. You can measure to what extent someone is talking to society, to the public through the media, is sort of taking out the time to actually be a science communicator. Yeah. And that's also impact. Or someone who develops tools that people can use in order to understand complex issues, for example, in climate change, things that the public can engage with. Many scientists do not want to do it or do not do it because that pressure to produce academic output is just overwhelming.
Yeah, and you don't really have the time to do anything
exactly,
else.
Yeah.
Exactly. I'll come back to the fact that I'm coming from the media, and when I was listening to your lecture, I thought to myself, how do I position this podcast? Do I position this podcast for the public to understand, or do I position this podcast for academics? Because all of this can go over the heads of the public.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter to them. What is this research all about? What does it mean to be a research-based educational institution, Professor Matthias?
Can you explain a little bit what the question is exactly getting at? I mean,
sure.
Yeah, as a researcher in general, you also you have, particularly in the medical sciences where I am, you also have that wish to make a difference and not just collect papers and collect impact factors.
And when you look at the outside, from the outside in, as the layperson, they're more thinking about teaching. Rather than research. How do we get people to understand the importance of research and how it has brought us to where we are today?
Yeah, I think teaching is very important, and teaching often also makes you think about the research you're doing, and it gives you ideas. Questions students ask are often really, really relevant questions that get you to think about, perhaps your next research project or the next question you want to ask in your research, inspired by the experience while teaching and by the questions, the exchanges you have with young, fresh minds. So teaching is a very important part of academic life, and it shouldn't be separated, completely. Research from teaching, it should go together.
Yeah, I've always wondered if there was more emphasis on research. Does that mean you're only going to attract academics who are research-based rather than those who have other interests like engagement and for education as well?
I guess it depends on the area. I mean, if you have highly specialized particle physics or topics that perhaps they're actually not that many, let's say, courses being offered, or some university like Monash Malaysia does not have particle physics, I assume. Yeah. So in a middle income country like Malaysia, I think the question of the societal impact is perhaps even greater than it is in my country, Switzerland. So you do want to recruit people who see both sides. Ideally, they're excellent in both areas. Yeah. It's difficult to be excellent everywhere, but you can also learn. You can become a better teacher, for example, over the years.
Yeah. Let's talk about funding. For many universities, grant funding sort of contributes. It's a source of income, right? And when we talk about funding, funders rely heavily on publishing track record and in academia. They also fund more research coming out of prestigious universities. Funders also want to ensure that their funds are used in the best possible way. Does that sort of leave out a lot of many researchers or academics, given this criteria, and then the push to want to publish and be cited and all of that? That's also a problem. Should funders look at this differently?
Yeah, I think funders actually, I feel, have made a real effort to move away from the bean counting that we discussed a few minutes ago, and to really look at the quality of the research rather than what the applicant has done, how many publications this person has done in the past, whether this is a high quality project and the person who is submitting it can do it. So it's feasible, and it's sort of the team and the project are a good match. Also, there has been, I think, more openness towards research that involves the stakeholders that are affected potentially by the results. So what we call transdisciplinary research that actually involves the people who will be using the results or be affected by the results, to listen to them and to help to give them the opportunity to co-shape, co-design the research to make it as impactful as possible.
And with the lack of funding now, Professor Matthias, everyone's scrambling for funds to advance the research and do very good things. But as I said earlier, for many universities, grant funding also funds. It's a source of income for them. Is there a need for greater accountability for funders so that they understand where funding is actually going?
Yeah, I think research funders have, an obligation to really look at what the longer term impact is of what they fund, and not only in terms of academic impact, but also societal impact. So a research funder, in my view, should have a little unit, a little data team that actually does assess the impact that the research they funded had longer term, and have these results, feeding back to their policy making, where they want to move, where they want to invest more, etc. And I think in the past, perhaps there was too much of a, again, sort of metrics-driven approach, and that also led to a little bit of a closed shop, perhaps, that the people who were, in the system, they got more money, what we call the Matthew effect, if you have, you'll be given. So to sort of break that open and make it more possible also for younger researchers to get into that system and for more diverse research to be funded.
Okay. And just to build on that, do you think the need for publications should be decoupled with rankings, for an example? And that's one of the drivers for this whole ecosystem in academia and research, publications and funding. Should we decouple that?
You mean decouple the publications from
Rankings.
Promotion or ranking of universities or people? Ranking of universities. I think the university rankings are also an area where, people should look. First of all, often they're not very transparent. I mean, the data should be openly available and people should be able to reproduce their rank. They should understand why are we, there and someone else is in another place. So it should be much more transparent. It depends a little bit on which ranking we're talking about, but some rankings are really not very transparent and also rely on opinions of other people. So the university rankings, I think, need a scientific overhaul, okay, in the spirit of, more transparency and criteria that are actually not only based on metrics or numbers, but also on a research culture that an institution has and promotes, which is, inclusive and acknowledging, etc.
Okay, let's talk about inclusive. We talk about funding. There appears to be a significant disparity between the resources available to researchers in the global south and the global north. And this affects everything from access to paywalled articles to the institutional infrastructure needed for this research. But how do the business models of major publishers and the biases in funding sort of perpetuate this divide, and what can we do about it?
Yeah, I mean, the publishers, I think, they have discovered middle-income countries as a market, particularly the ones that I mentioned, MDPI, for example. I mean, they've actually really got a lot of participation from middle-income countries, a lot of reviewers review for these journals from middle-income countries. And I think perhaps what for a country like Malaysia could do is to try to promote their own publishing outlets and have quality assurance and have or Southeast Asian, a conglomerate, and not having a company sitting in Switzerland like in the case of MDPI, which quality-wise is, problematic, and all these special issues that I mentioned. So you could, as a region, you could find a response and found a series of journals, the Southeast Asian Journal of, epidemiology or public health or, endocrinology, you name it, and basically say, we're going to do this on a non-profit basis, and we want the quality to be high. We don't want to be the slaves of that company in Switzerland, which is very profit-oriented and very much on quantity rather than quality.
But the publication business is profit-driven, Professor Matthias. While we're talking about MDPI, that's the Multidisciplinary Digital Publishing Institute based in Switzerland.
In Basel, yeah.
That's right. It's an open access pay-to-publish model for sort of robust peer reviews. You want to tell me more about this whole idea of predatory versus trustworthy publications?
Yeah.
And MDPI is known as the predatory
Well,
publication.
I wouldn't say that. I think their reputation has really, and also Frontiers, their reputation has been
questionable.
Yeah, it has taken a hit, and that is because it became clear that they did publish really papers that should not have been published, of very low quality, where clearly peer review failed completely. And that has dented their reputation. Also, this drive to really publish as much as possible, inviting people to edit special issues, asking their friends, would you contribute an article? And this, of course, generates income for the publisher. Yeah. And this sort of very aggressive rent extraction, if you like, in economic terms, approach is damaging science, is taking a lot of energy or resources. People still need to review and need to write these papers that possibly should not have been written. Rather, another paper should have been written, and perhaps over a longer period of time, to make a real contribution. It's that spirit of really the bean counting spirit, the more the better.
Yeah, but where does that leave the junior researcher? The junior researcher needs a foot in the door, and something like MDPI would work for them, because the other publications are not going to give the junior researcher a chance, right? So it's a systemic problem that we have here.
Yeah, no, I see that, and I very much like that junior researchers are given that opportunity. But they're given this opportunity by a publisher which, as we know, has a mixed reputation and is very profit-oriented. There are not-for-profit publishers. The learned societies often are not-for-profit. I mentioned PLOS, the Public Library of Science in the US, which is not-for-profit. And as I said, as a region, Southeast Asia could try to develop a PLOS type of enterprise, which would also offer junior researchers, but would have that sort of quality standard, high up.
Yeah. Till we get to that stage, what would you consider a legitimate journal?
It's difficult to have lists of legitimate journals. I think as a junior researcher, you need to think about what are the journals that your peers publish in. You need to talk to the more senior people. What are good journals for this article? The article needs to find a home where it can actually have impact, where it's read by the community that's interested in that topic, independently of the impact factor, etc. So the choice of the journal is not something that should be guided by a number, and certainly not by the impact factor, but it should be guided by judgment again. What is a good home for this paper? And senior people should really help the junior people to find that good home. But some of the rules of the university, that it has to be in the top quarter of the impact factor in that category of the journal citation reports, goes against that. So you just sort of go down the ladder of all the journals in that first quarter, and you get rejected because it's the wrong journal for that article. That is not helpful, and there I think the universities, including Monash Malaysia, could do better, and that would also help the junior people.
Let's talk about the peer review process. It's a cornerstone for scientific evaluation. Yes. Yet it's described as a bottleneck. It's a bottleneck plagued by bias, slow timelines, and inconsistency. And let's not even talk about remuneration, right? People do peer reviews for free. For free, yes, generally, and these are catastrophic. We can see catastrophic failures from this. Let's take the Wakefield paper for an example.
Yes,
right. Yeah. It was in the Lancet for 12 years before it was actually pulled off. So, is the traditional peer review model still fit for purpose, do you think?
I think peer review in general does improve papers. But the amount of papers that need to be peer reviewed just has pushed the system really to the boundaries. It's just no longer possible to review all these papers carefully. Arguably, when you think about it, how many papers should you publish per year? Should you perhaps publish as many as you review? In order to make this a balanced a balanced situation, the number you review and the number you submit. But people don't think like that. They submit as much as possible and they say, I haven't got time to review. It's, in a way, a duty to contribute, but the number of papers has increased so much that the system is just no longer working. And I think a lot of papers don't get peer-reviewed well. Peer review anyway is a subjective enterprise. Even if you have serious people, you will get disagreement, you will get misunderstanding, perhaps because the paper wasn't exactly clear. Some papers are not very well written, and you misunderstand, and then you are negative where you should have been, neutral or positive, etc. So it's a very human, subjective process, but still, on average, it does improve. It is an important part of the academic system, and it does improve the work of others. And I have been so grateful during my career for all these reviewers, and they have improved my work considerably. That there's no doubt about it. Not always, but often.
Yeah. And it's a vicious cycle, I feel, because every year academics are required to publish more and more. It's a pipeline, right? You got 2 this year, then you got to do more next year, and it just goes on and on. So it's how do we stop this madness?
Well, we stop this by having the funders say we don't want you to publish a lot of papers. We want you to publish a few really good papers every year, perhaps 2 or 3, but really papers that make a contribution.
But then it goes back to funding as well. Universities want you to publish more so that you can bring in more funding, and it just goes on.
Yeah, but if the funders get away from quantity and really look at contributions, which can be based on fewer articles, that's an important step in the right direction. And universities should follow suit and not say because someone has more articles than someone else, that is the preferred candidate. And it's always quantity. But look at the person, more holistically, their contributions to science, how they fit the post, how they, what they would do when promoted, etc. Not get away from the bean counting and from that, sort of overwhelming pressure to more publications all the time.
Are you one of the few who's championing this anti-bean counting phenomenon?
No, I don't think so. I think, on the contrary, I think I'm on a wave. I think a lot of people see the problem that we are facing with this publish-perish culture and would like another research culture, which is much more attractive also for younger people to come in and would be very critical, for example, towards that sort of special issue explosion of papers that I mentioned in my talk.
Do you want to tell me more about this regular versus special issues?
Yeah, I mean, the 2 publishers, MDPI and Frontiers, have sort of, in recent years, switched almost from regular issues to mainly publishing special issues. And these special issues, they are, on invitation. And the good thing is that, as you said, that junior people from perhaps also lower income countries get an opportunity to edit an issue, which in principle is a very good idea and a good thing. But there is a lot of pressure on, getting this out, getting as many papers as possible, published as quickly as possible, and the quality really suffers. That's what people tell me who have engaged in often junior people, and sometimes they say never again.
Right.
It was not a good experience. There was a lot of pressure from the publisher, and they didn't feel they had the space to really shape this issue the way they wanted.
With this need to bring in funding, there are a lot of universities now who are sort of drawing back on curiosity-driven research. They're focusing more on other sort of research. What does this mean? Does this mean we're out of the running, perhaps, for a Nobel Prize? What are the implications of that?
I really think we need both. We do need curiosity-driven research in order to make progress and really make discoveries that, perhaps at the moment when you make the discovery, you don't really see the application. But perhaps 10 years, 20 years down the line, all of a sudden this becomes really important for a technology or, an approach to solving a problem. So I think we shouldn't only do research that is closer to application. We should do fundamental research. We need to fund it as humankind, in order to understand our world better, understand our universe, etc. This is really, really crucial, I think. Yeah. Both is needed. Yeah.
And let's talk about accessibility of research. With so many scientific findings, is it more accessible? Because a lot of it is now in PDF format, it's terribly static. A lot has changed over the years with digitization and all of that. Is it easier for both experts and the lay public to navigate and understand this ecosystem of where to find this research?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, a lot more has become open access, so that anyone can access the article, the research findings. And I also think that artificial intelligence is really helping people to navigate and to find relevant answers. Of course, you then also need to have the capacity to really judge this critically, but things have become much faster. I mean, in 10 years ago, doing a literature search, really finding the evidence on that particular issue, that now can take almost seconds, with AI models. That is amazing, and a very interesting development. Also, perhaps other aspects of AI are more problematic, but overall, I mean, it has really improved. I think the way we can deal with evidence and we can find it quickly.
I mean, with 5 million articles published annually, thank God for AI.
Yes,
There's
yes.
no other way
Although,
of finding this.
You probably wouldn't need the 5 million. You could do with less if people really concentrated on the real contributions. A lot of these papers are never cited, are read by the editor, perhaps one reviewer or two, and that's it. So there's a lot of, I think, inefficiency also in the system due to that pressure to publish.
Okay. And how do we reimagine scientific publishing so that it's less affected by profits, profit motives? What would that look like? What's a responsible metrics for research in this entire ecosystem? I'm putting you on the spot here.
Yeah. Well, I think
fix the world's problems because we need it.
Yeah. No, we need to communicate what research finds, and we need to disseminate it. And of course, academic publishing is one route, but it could be much more community driven. I did emphasize preprints. So the idea, you write an article, you publish it, you make it available. It's not published in a journal, but it's made available on the web, and then there is a process of peer review, and everyone contributes, and then there's a final version, and that is sort of the accepted version. And there are publishers that are moving, or platforms that are moving in that the direction. So much more community-based review, and really getting away from that label of the journal. which, the reputation, the stamp that journals provide to really get rid of that and just concentrate on dissemination and critical appraisal of research.
Tell me more about DORA, the San Francisco Declaration on Research Assessment, and that's something you seem to be very optimistic about.
Well, I think it is a initiative which, as we've heard in the discussion already, is more than 10 years old. It has made a difference. It has made it clear what the drawbacks of the impact factor are. It has emphasized that you should look at content and not at the journal where it is published. It had, as I said, it had more impact on the level of funding agencies than at the level of universities. It takes a long time. Universities are very conservative, and also the leadership does not necessarily have, the will or even can really influence what is happening in that school or this faculty. So, it takes a long time, but I think we're on the right track with the DORA declaration. Really sums it up where the direction of travel. It will take more time, but I'm quite optimistic that we will improve the situation quite a bit in the years to come.
Really? I mean, I'm thinking generations here, because you need to get rid of this culture, right, of prestige and who a professor is, who's an associate professor, that kind of thing, that comes with academia. And this can be probably a game changer, actually.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing wrong with feeling proud that you made it to associate professor and that you see yourself as having a certain status. There's nothing wrong with that. But how you get there and why you get there and what the criteria are, that's where I think we can do better. And I think DORA is sort of a useful initiative in that context.
Right. And where do you think the will should start from? Educational institutions, the publishers, the funders, the academics? Where does it need to start?
Yeah, it's that love triangle. Everyone is sort of a little bit caught in that triangle, and everyone benefits. And it's quite difficult to cut through. But personally, I think, first of all, the funders, because they have a lot of influence, they fund a lot, and they're less in that love triangle. I think they can take themselves out. They're also not in competition. Like universities, of course, compete, the rankings you mentioned. And then the next would be the universities creating a culture that influences their researchers, that could be the next step of change. The publishers, I think, the for-profit publishers will always be chasing, the profit, and they will be most difficult to
convince,
to influence. Because, they have shareholders. They are in a different world, and as long as we give them the opportunity to make these profits and make a lot of money with publishing many papers and every year more, then they will do it. Yeah.
We've spoken a lot about what needs to be fixed, but what do you think is working well right now?
Okay, I think as I started off my talk with sort of highlighting positive developments, like that. Research findings are much more accessible. I didn't mention AI, but I would also mention that AI is helping, for example, to review the literature, to extract data, etc. That publication bias is probably less of a problem today than it was sort of 20 years or 30 years ago. And the whole open access movement is in principle a very good thing. It's been abused by some publishers. We mentioned them. But so a lot of progress has been made, but that sort of breaking the quantity over quality issue, that hasn't really happened yet, but I hope it will.
Okay, what would you like to leave us with on this whole topic of the end of publish or perish in academia?
It's not going to end now, but it will end soon, Mira.
Thank you very much
You're welcome.
for joining us, Professor Matthias Egger from the Center for Reproducible Science and Research Synthesis and from the Department of Infectious Diseases at the University of Zurich, Switzerland, as well as Professor in Population Health Sciences at the University of Bristol in the UK. I'm Mira Sivasodi, Professor of Practice, Digital Media and Communication, Monash University, Malaysia.